Hello, this is Naomi with Bell Stitches Pirates. I can't get my STs out today. This is Flosstube number 10. It is a channel about mostly cross stitch, occasionally other random projects that I'm doing. And this is the weekly update. I have finally completed WIPGO number 19. Which was to FFO 2 projects and also finish one that I was really close to finishing. So this is, oh Lord, the glare is going to be horrible. We'll do our very best. This is the first FFO, and this was also the one that required some finishing. I basically had to do all the beading on it. And a little bit of back stitching, but it's a Mill Hill kit called Tea Room, and I cut the mat board. I fought with the mat board. I didn't cut the mat board. I fought with the mat board. And I wanted it really close to the piece, the edges. So Mill Hill kits, these Mill Hill kits, they don't give you much in the way of a margin. I think when I trimmed off the one row of really raggedy edge while I was still figuring out exactly what I was going to do with it, it ended up with like 6 rows of borders, 5 rows of borders, something like that. Maybe half an inch, 5/8 of an inch tops. And so there was very narrow border. So what I did was I put a teeny tiny pieces, well, teeny tiny. I put the edge of a piece of Scotch tape on the back of the perforated paper. And once I had the shape cut and had rough fit it or dry fit it, then I laid the cut mat board on top and pressed it down so that the tape would hold it in place. And then I took another piece of mat board that was cut very close to the same dimensions. It was one of my, it didn't quite cut the right, I didn't quite get my measurements correct, but it was enough for covering most of the back. And I used Eileen's tacky glue to glue it so that this piece is the framing, the mat board and the stitching are all one piece. I may choose, I'm not positive that I'll keep the glass, but I'll keep it for a while and see how I like it. But my thought was to, as I get more and more of these, swap them out every so often. Which leads me to my second FFO. And this one I had finished last year. I just needed to fully finish it. And it's another Mill Hill kit. It is Proud Peacock. And I did the same thing with it. The perforated paper on this one is a dark green. And I originally thought I would get a dark green or a green mat board and pull from the greens. And when I went to the store to pick up some mat board, I didn't like the shades of green that they had. It didn't match the color of the perforated paper, and it didn't really match the greens in the design. So then I started looking to see if they had an orange or a blue, and I really like the way this turned out with the pulling that rich royal blue of the peacock. It makes it not look quite so truncated here. But yeah, I really like that, and picked up the gold frame to pull in. There's a lot of yellow citrusy beads in this, and kind of pull the golden colors out of the piece. So really liking this, and really pleased to finally finish and fully finish the 2 pieces. Now they get to find a place. If we weren't renting, I'd go find a place with a hammer and a nail and hang them up, because they've got nice little hooks on the back. But we're renting, and my husband has a mortal fear of holes in the wall and having to spackle and paint to get our deposit back. He's convinced that they won't appreciate whatever job we do. And I get it. It's a lot of work to move out and put the house back together. I've done it a few times. But I've moved a lot more in my lifetime than he has. And so things like having to do some spackling and painting doesn't scare me. It's part of the like mental process of, I mean, I've even been so bold as brass as to, during a move out inspection, like the pre-move out inspection where they come in and they take a look at everything and say, okay, if you don't fix all this, we're going to charge you. Place that I had with my sister, I don't know what they did. Somebody didn't measure. The fridge that they bought for the property did not fit the opening for the fridge in the kitchen. It was off by like an inch, half an inch even. It was super close, but super not close. The fridge wouldn't fit. It fit height-wise, it didn't fit width-wise. They needed to chop an inch off of their counter length. It was close, but close the wrong way. So the fridge went to the garage because it wasn't sitting in my dining room. I needed a dining room. And if it was in the dining room, which is where they put it when they installed it, was they just put it in the dining room next to the nearest outlet. You had no room for a table and chairs. Like, it was a small eat-in dining nook more than anything. And so, half the floor space was taken up by the fridge. So it was like, okay, we gotta move the fridge. And out to the garage it went. We used it. Don't get me wrong, we used it. But then where the fridge was supposed to be, I got a little fridge only, like beverage fridge. It wasn't a beverage fridge. It was just like a mini fridge, but it didn't have the freezer top. It was just a fridge. That way we could keep things like some creamer for coffee and, milk for mornings, like the morning foods and condiments in the fridge in the house, to minimize going out to the garage all the time, especially in the winter when you're trying to keep your heat in the house and not outside. So, minimize the traffic out to the garage for those half asleep moments or the I need to make a sandwich. So kept little things. And then where the cabinetry was void for the top of the fridge, it's like, we're converting this kind of into a bit of a coffee bar. We need a place for cups. We need a place to put the mugs. We had built a little countertop extension for our coffee maker and our hot water teapot, and we had some storage things that, like storage drawers for the tea and the coffee that sat underneath those pots. But then the mugs were clear on the other side of the kitchen. And so we found some simple pine shelving that we then, it was the right length, and it was a nice little width to put one or two usually two mugs on it. And we installed it into the wall, but if I took it out, it was going to leave holes. Okay. And so when the guy was doing the inspection, I told him, I said, FYI, that's your fridge and it doesn't fit here. So we installed this and made it a coffee bar. Do you care, which would you rather? I can remove them, patch it, paint it. That's not a problem. Or I can leave it. And he looked at it and he goes, you guys did a nice job. Leave it. All right. So if I install something and I think that it's a more functional thing, I inquire. But the long and short is, if this was our place, I'd be putting a nail in the wall and hanging up the pictures. But it's not, so I have to figure out how to display them without putting a hole in the wall, and where's the safest, best place in earthquake country. So those are my FFOs and my ramble about rental move-outs. I have, unlike last month, where because I did Bringo and kind of did a bunch of worked on a bunch of projects. I think I worked on, out of 18 projects that I have currently in my rotation, I've worked on 12 or 15. Like, I worked on most of my projects at least one day. And a few of them I worked on for days and days and days. This month's not quite that way. I kind of got a little tired of constantly switching. I'm finding for myself that switching, I'm not a monogamous stitcher, in that unless it's a very small piece, I can't just stitch something from start to finish. I get bored, and so I have to change it up. Either, the section, the colors I'm just not really invested in, or, feeling at the moment. If I have a ship that's got a lot of browns in it, bunches of browns. If I'm working on the ship and it's like, okay, I've got to do all these browns, and for whatever reason, brown just isn't my thing that day, I'm not going to feel like stitching it, so I need to have something else to go to. But too many projects, and I mean like trying to figure out how to touch all of my projects, including the ones that are banished for this year until I finish some things, is I have a lot more than 18 whips. But I'm in the No New Starts group, and I'm doing the 22 and 2022 plan, where I only have a maximum of 22 active whips at a time. And what I'm finding with that is it gives me enough variety that I can change things up if I'm bored with something. But it's also giving me a more focused focus. So when I went through and put together my plan and picked my 18 projects, part of what I did was I looked at sizes, and I looked at designers or categories, and I had like 4 projects from one designer, and it's a designer that I like, but he does a ton of fractionals and he does a ton of backstitching. And I have my limits on how much fractionals and backstitching I can do before I just am over the project and need a break. So I decided to put those pieces into one category, pick one, and then the others got put into the timeout bin, the not yet bin. And so once I finish the piece that I am working on of his, then I'll go and pull the next one out, pick the next one out of the box and put it into the rotation. That way, A, I'm finishing things, and B, or I have a chance of finishing things. I have a lot of big projects. I discovered I either go small, ornament size, or I jump all the way up to large. I have very little medium. I think I've got one medium piece, maybe two. Everything else is large or BAP. Large or mega large. So January was exhausting. February, I just needed to kind of keep it zen. So I used WhipGo as my starting off point. And for WhipGo, the numbers this month were number 2, take it back, number 5, and number 17. Number 5 was to finish a project that I started in 2020. I looked at my available 2020 starts and I have 5, I think, 5 or 6. Like, of the projects that I have actively in my to-do pile, my WIP pile this year, 5 or 6 of them were 2020 starts. And not a single one of them could be finished in 1 month, not even with dedicated stitching, because they're all big projects that only have a limited amount of stitches in them. So I changed it. I evaluated where each one was, and I changed my goal to finish a page on a 2020 WIP. So my focus piece this month, and it's stealing the next piece, has been to finish page 1 of Tropical Treasures, artwork by John Enright, charting by Hade, Heaven and Earth Designs. And if I had just stuck to the page, so the page is roughly in this area, and then it cuts off around here. So that's page 1. If I had stuck to just focused on the page, I'd be done with it. Because I just got odds and ends of confetti. So because the little tiny bit of sky that I had going on has been calling my name, I would find some confetti. Basically, I started filling in the confetti to finish diagonals. And I'm working in 20 wide diagonals. And so then I would go up here and I'd do another diagonal. So like that's the end of a diagonal. And I think it's either 2 or 3 diagonals across in the sky. So now, since there's still half of February to go, and I'm sort of joining in on the Olympic stitching. I'm not posting very much. I missed the first 2 days of the challenge because the 4th and the 5th, I worked an insane amount. I was working on a show, and some shows you can take breaks and others not so much. So this one was not so much. I basically, to get off my feet and have a chance to like breathe without a mask on, I spent my dinner hour in my car. And so I'd eat, and I didn't think to pack a good light. And so then I would go, I just chilled. I tried to grid with just my car light on, and that was a disaster. Well, it wasn't a disaster. It was painfully slow. Trying to stitch wouldn't have happened at all. So the 4th and the 5th were shot. I was gone. I was gone all day Friday because I worked my day job and went straight from my day job to the show and did a 4-hour prep, steaming and pressing things and going over what was required for the show. Then I worked the show and left for home at 10:30 at night. And then I got up and had to be back the next day after working from 9 o'clock in the morning all day until 10:30 at night, plus more than an hour round trip of driving. And then the next day was Saturday, and where this theater is located, it might be 40 minutes from my house at 11 o'clock at night, but on a Saturday afternoon or mid-morning, I have to give myself 2.5 hours to be sure that I'm not going to get stuck in traffic and have to take all kinds of side streets to get around the traffic, which can be just as bad. So my call might have been at 2. I had to leave the house at 11:30, quarter to noon. So I packed lunch, drove there, ate in the car, went in, worked my prep, getting everything steamed and ready for the show. Then we proceeded to have our dinner break, ate my dinner in the car, took a breather from the mask, put the mask back on, went back in to work the show, and then towards the end of the show, we started packing up for them to go home or to their next stop. And it was close to 11 o'clock when I left the second night. So Friday and Saturday, the 4th and 5th, were shot. No stitching whatsoever. And then Sunday, all I did was sit on the couch and stitch because I was beat. I was sore, my feet hurt, my legs hurt, my back hurt. Just let me sit. Definitely not conditioned for theater anymore. So I looked at the various prompts, and I basically, for about half of the Olympic stitching prompts that one of the ladies in Garon's Stitchery group came up with and put out there, I could make this piece fit. And so every day that this piece fits a prompt, I stitch on this piece. And then I have basically 2 other pieces with one exception. There was one prompt I couldn't make any of the 3 pieces work. So I started out, this was the first piece that I was going to use as a prompt, in part because it's number 5 from Whip Go. And I just want to get a ton of, a chunk into it. And then, from there, I tried to fit in, hang on, I'm about to lose the needle because it got tangled up in my Parked Threads twist. Once I post this, I'm going to stitching, and this is the piece for today. So my other Whip Go piece is this piece. And this is a piece that I started in January. And it's all hidden up here. I looked at the pattern. It's a magazine pattern from the January edition of World of Cross Stitch. I'll put the magazine below. The issue. I looked at it, and it looked like full crosses to me. I don't know what, I didn't look at it good enough, or in enough detail, apparently, because I started out stitching the top 1/1, and it was gorgeous. And then I got about halfway across the top border and found the first fractional. And then I looked further in the pattern and realized there's a lot more fractionals. Now, I didn't cut the fabric in preparation for it. I simply started it at the top corner. I was going to cut the fabric after I finished it, which is good because the fabric is big enough for it. 2/2. I just was thinking that 1/1 would look really pretty and delicate. Except there is a million fractionals. They're just not in the top border, with a couple of exceptions. But, I mean, the little people. Fractional City. I mean, yeah, it's only like 4 or 5. But they're like 15 stitch people. They're teeny tiny people with like 4 colors. So I've worked on this 3 or 4 days. This is my Whip Go number 17 piece, which was the goal for that was to stitch on a house or a shelter. And this piece is loaded with houses, and they're all very, very small, petite houses for the most part. I think the government building, which is up in the top center part, it's either a government building like City Hall, or it's a church or school. It's got that kind of look to it, like it should either be a place where government officials work, or a school's there, or a fancy church. It's the main building with wings on either side. But most of the buildings are, like that big. So nice and small. They're all a little bit different. And they all have some kind of symbol or design on them. Like one of them has an intricate detailed wreath on the side of the house, or what looks like a wreath. The fractionals on this piece are insanely crazy, but it's also really, really cute. It's also a massive amount of confetti stitches. It's not stitched up here, but like there's a driver in the carriage. He's got like 3 colors that have 1 stitch. And then that color's nowhere else to be found. So securing your stitches could be challenging. But it's a really adorable little piece. The pond, I did the people and the trees and the bench mostly first. Like I got these 2 people done and this tree, and then I started filling in. And basically I would stitch until I'd run into another color and kind of stitched it a bit on the diagonal. And I stitched it. I've been stitching this piece English style, which is the one full cross at a time. So back and forth, snake style with 1 full cross at a time. But the pond is almost done. There's a handful of back stitching to make their skate blades. That's it. So this piece is pretty much done, and well, and that tree needs to be finished. But this piece is pretty much done, or the pond is pretty much done on this piece. The piece isn't. And I've got it a couple of times next week, so I'll be coming back to it during Olympic stitching. I probably will put it away after I finish the last Olympic stitching prompt that it meets, because I'm enjoying it, but I'm not obsessed about it. So it is what it is. And then the last piece that I worked on, the last whip I worked on this last week, was one of the prompts was for something that's like dark and scary. I don't find winter activities dark and scary, and I don't find my Tropical Treasures piece dark and scary. I mean, I could maybe argue that the cliff is dark and scary, but when I saw the prompt, what came to mind was Alice in Wonderland, you know, dark and scary, you know, in a strange place, scary people. And so I'd previously gotten to just below the cat, where we've stitched around the middle and across part of the top down the left side. Yeah. No. The left side. Down this side. And then across, and now we're coming up the right hand side. So this one is the spades. Or are those clubs? Those are clubs. I don't know. I don't remember my suits very well. It's been a while since I played card games. And then it's the Cheshire Cat. And then there's a red heart. And that's part 13 out of 19. So this is coming along. And I did all of this in one afternoon and evening. I mean, it's close to 1,000 stitches, like 850, 900, something like that. Like, it's a ton of stitches. But once I got into the rhythm and the pattern, so like these are very much a very definite pattern, a very defined pattern. And, you know, once you get it started, you just keep going until you've got enough repeats. And then the next little bit, it goes up into his tail. And then he'll be, you know, a red heart next to the top of his tail, and the Cheshire Cat will be done, and it'll be time for part 14. So I don't have this one on very often. I think it's got 2 more prompts for the Olympics, and I'll stitch on it for those prompts, and then may or may not work on it for the remainder of February. It'll probably depend on if I'm really close to a part finish. Because, like, let's say for some reason I stitched on this for the rest of the prompts and I had the cat all done but still had the heart to do, I'd finish the heart just so that I could say part 13's done, over with, no more. So that's where I'm at on Alice in Wonderland. And that was the 3rd piece I worked on this week. And I just worked on it for one day. My plans for next week are to continue with my Olympic stitching prompts. Excuse me. Same 3 pieces. Most of the prompts are focused in, I think, on Tropical Treasure. It's on at least 2 or 3 more days for the next week. And then Alice has 1 or 2 prompts. And Winter has a couple prompts. And then there's I want to say next Friday, there is a prompt for working on a whip with words. Even Alice doesn't have words. So that one had me kind of stumped. Just a little bit. And my solution for that was for that one day to pull out my Christmas club ornaments, because every single one of them has words, and I've got a bunch of them that are really close to being finished. They just need like 4 or 5 beads sewn on, or a little bit of Krynic. Like, they're really close to being done. 4 or 5 of them are. And even if they weren't, they stitch up really quick. Depending on how much stitching time I have the day that I work on it, and I want to say it's on a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on the amount of time that I have, it seriously, I can get 2/3 of one stitched in an evening. So they stitch up really quick. And you know, that's great. And now we move to haul. I've been trying to keep my my spending to a limit, or to a minimum. I've managed to avoid most of the de-stash sites for the most part. I do have a couple of things that I have bought that came in. So the one is, I have had, let me wind this real quick and then I'll show you. I have been managing my threads on this with this silicone collapsible bobbin. So you wind your threads around it and then you pop the one side down. The other side's fairly firm. And then, you know, it's great because you can tuck it in there. The problem is that as I was working on it, I started out with a handful of handful of strings. And then because I was for a short time trying to get a page finish, I would go down and, like park the thread in page 2 and then keep going, or, go get another thread and keep working on filling it in. And so I ended up with this crazy mess. And I have more of these, but the more that I dealt with just the one in here, the more I realized that I would end up with, if I wasn't careful, I would end up with a whole mess of them tucked in all the way across. And it was just like, they're too big. So then I looked and I tried, and I've got the smallest size that I can find. I tried to find smaller. This is 1 7/8, something like that. It's under 2 inches. And they make like 3-inch ones too. Couldn't find smaller ones. So then I'm looking and I'm like, there's got to be something else that can do a similar job. And this is what I've come up with. So it's a sewing bobbin that I wound the same way. And it's a little clip. And it's about half the size. it still tucks in, and I can limit it to just the threads in one diagonal. So if I'm getting to a point, which I will, I'll continue this to around here. If there's more of that color further down, I'll go ahead and park the thread. And so because of how many columns that or diagonals that I'll end up having, I may reach a point where I have 10 or 12 of them. And then you also end up with like this. These are parked in the next diagonal to continue working on the sky. So because I'm in a spot where I'm not just dealing with trees or cliff, but I've got sky and cliff and trees, if I'm going into the next diagonal because that diagonal is finished all the way down, then I may need 2 or 3 going along the length of the diagonal. So I got a set of those. That was a non-traditional haul, and it's just this little rubber clip and then a plain sewing bobbin, and you just clip it around once your threads are on it. And as I get those diagonals down to where I have to stop, I'm forced to stop by the frame, more and more of these will get put on. The other little bit of haul that I did, I got caught by I guess it was like an auction type sale. Maple Minders did some fabric dyeing, and I don't buy that much in the way of fabric. And I didn't even like look at her fabric sale. Let's turn it this way. Didn't even look at it because I was like, I'm not gonna fight with other people for fabric that I probably don't need. And then at the end, she had a handful of unclaimed pieces, and this was one. And aside from the fact that it's just really cool looking, it was a fabric count that I've been wanting to try. So it's going to take a very special piece because it's going to require 1/1 stitching. So it's going to have to be something that I can do, or that's only full cross. So I'm going to have to look for the piece, and it's going to have to be a piece that works really well on this, or pieces. But it's 25 count Jobelin, or not Jobelin, Lugana, 25 count Lugana. And I have been looking at various people who say that they like 25 count, and it's like, well, 25 count's the one count I haven't really tried. Yeah, I've got stuff on 28 count that's 1/1. I've got Tropical Treasures is 22 count, 1/1. So, you know, it's like, okay, maybe I should try the piece in the middle. I have a piece that's on 27 count. That's my band sampler. And while I like it, I'm not crazy about it because over 2, it's the equivalent of 13.5. And I find 14 almost too big. Like, Winter Sampler is on 28 count over 2, but I dyed it. I dyed it using boiling hot water, so it shrunk a bit. And it's probably closer to a 30 or a 32 when all's said and done, because like I said, I used boiling hot water when I dyed it. So I know it shrank. It's Monaco. It's 100% cotton. My 2 chart pieces that I got on Stash Unloading are this one, Tavern Signs by Carriage House Samplings. Sampler Maker caught my eye, but I also like the horse one. And then I couldn't resist Stitcher's Verse. And it says it's a cross stitch in country crafts or a leisure arts, depending on who you're looking at. And it says, cross stitchers are a different breed. The things we hope for, the things we need. We wish for floss to finish that row. We sometimes wish our guests would go. We wait all day for that time to be, that special time, that time for me. Each needle is threaded, the colors arrayed. Scissors and chart have been carefully laid. Now we relax, this is our pleasure, stitching this piece of soon-to-be treasure. We always ignore that mental warning, stitching all night makes it rough in the morning. But time's unimportant, we don't heed clocks. We just need floss and a sewing box. Our project awaits us, now we proceed. This must be heaven, what more could we need? And I just loved it. So yeah, nobody else had claimed it, so I claimed it. Which is partly why I'm attempting to avoid the Stash Unloading sites. I'm not so much attempting to avoid them that I have left the group, but I've put the group on silent so I don't get the notifications. I have to catch it in my feed, and usually by then it's 3-4 hours later, and the piece that I was interested in, or pieces I'm interested in, somebody else claimed, so I just scroll on by. That's basically it. Nope, it's not. I'll be right back. Okay. So one of the reasons that, aside from just trying to be a little more fiscally conscious for minimizing my spending, my shopping on supplies and stash, is I've managed to purchase a couple of charts multiple times. And we're not talking, oh, I bought it and then 2 years later I bought it again, and because I forgot I had it in my stash to be worked on. No, we're talking I bought it twice in like a month. Like, the other one was on its way when I bought the first. The first one was on its way when I bought the second one. That bad. So, in honor of the fact that I apparently really like this chart, and that it's Flosstube number 10, it took me almost a year, but I figure getting a double-digit Flosstube is a good time to do a giveaway. So the chart that I have 2 of is Stitching Generations Together by Twin Peaks Primitive. This is a chart that, if memory serves, came out in October. I don't know if there's a copyright on it. That could help. It doesn't say when it was. Oh, there it is. All rights reserved 2021. So yes, it's a 2021 design. And so it's one of those where I'm pretty sure I put it on my pre-order list, and then I saw it pop up in one of the shops when I was buying something else after the market in October, and I managed to buy it from 2 different places at practically the same time. The one was a pre-order, and the other one was I'm buying like floss or something from them, and proceeded to throw it in my cart because I saw it and I loved it. It reminds me a bit of my family and family history. I enjoy genealogy. I enjoy researching and finding the stories of my family. And one of the things that I personally know about my family is that the women in my family have been crafters. Both of my grandmothers, my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandmother, were quilters. My mom taught me how to sew. She gave me my first cross-stitch kit. My aunt, who just passed away, was very artistic and crafty. She was more into the home craft, the crafty crafts. So paper crafts and painting and things like that. But you know, the women in my family have always been involved in needle arts of some kind. I have several aunts who knit or crochet. I don't knit. I haven't figured out tension, but I crochet. I don't do much of it anymore, but every so often I'll pick up the needles. I kind of go in waves where something's like a massive passion, and that I fixate on it, and then I ease off of it and go back to something that I've let sit by the wayside for a while. But I made 4 of my nieces and nephews. I made the 4 oldest nieces and nephews a blanket. Before they were born, I crocheted a blanket for each of them. And one of them, his blanket got lost in a move. And when he moved out closer to me, he was 7 or 8 years old, and he goes, "Aunt Naomi, I miss your blanket that you made me." And I said, "Oh, what'd you like about it?" Thinking maybe the colors or the texture. He's like, "I like the holes." He's one of the 2 that got a granny square blanket, not anything fancy, just a plain old patchwork granny square blanket, because both of my sisters were pregnant at the same time, and when the babies were due, I was in my final semester at school, at college. So I knew that I would be taking finals, and if I didn't get these made up as quick as possible, there was no way I was going to get 2 made. So I busted out 2, and patchwork was great because I took the bus a lot, so it was small. I could sit there and crochet. Once you've got the granny square pattern, you're good. You're golden. So he liked the holes. He liked putting his fingers through the holes and making something about that. He loved it. So he's like, can you make me another one? Sure. So I made him another blanket at 7 or 8 years old, and that blanket still lives on the end of his bed. It's way too small for him now. He's nearly 6 feet tall. But he's the one we yell at when we need somebody tall to get something from the cupboard. So why don't we use the word generation? And let me know if you have a trait that has been passed down through the generations. Let's use generations plural. And I'll put the word across the bottom. As always with giveaways, please be 18 so you can give me your address. I have no problems shipping this anywhere in the world. And I'll let it percolate for a couple weeks and we'll do the drawing on March 1st. Or close to March 1st. I will do it after the 28th of February, which should give us 1 or 2 more videos. The comment will need to be on this video, but give it a little bit of time to percolate. But yeah, I bought 2 of these because I wasn't keeping good track of what I bought. And now that we're at basically an hour, there might be a few minutes I can chop here or there because it's just dead silence or me going and getting something. I'm going to wrap this up. 3 projects, 2 FFOs. You would have thought it'd be a faster video, but I rambled. All right. Don't forget to enter the giveaway if you are interested. All right, I'm going to sign off, go do an edit of this, turn on the Olympics, and get some dinner. See you next week.